Oh, wow. I am so pleased to be standing up here this morning. Um, Thank you. I know a lot of you know my story, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we sort of go along. And I'm going to try and bring what God's given me. I went to a lot of effort to write it all out beautifully because, I haven't preached for a while and I really wanted to get it right. And then this morning, dear Liz Reed, where is she, said to me, yeah, God's just saying that you need to, hello Liz, you need to just be picking out what I tell you from this preach and not necessarily going through it all in. She didn't put it like that, but that's what she meant. And see, God's been saying that to me as well this morning. So I'm like, oh, thanks, God. Yeah, so thank you. So I hope you'll forgive me if there's a bit of stop and starting because I suddenly think, no, that's not what God's saying. We're going to basically get there, but it may not get there quite as I was intending this morning. So I hope that's all right. Okay, so when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I love journeys. And then I thought, actually, that's not true. I love journeys when I'm going on a holiday and I'm really looking forward to getting there and the aeroplane turned up on time and there haven't been any issues and I'm not stuck in traffic. Because then it's quite exciting. We go down to Cornwall quite a lot, and when we're driving down to Cornwall, there's a place that we tend to stop for breakfast, and it's all sort of part of the holiday, isn't it? But of course, journeys don't always work out like that. So a few years ago, we went to Prague just before Christmas to go to the Christmas markets. And it was great getting there. We had a lovely time, very straightforward, but not so much on the way back. We got to Prague for our evening flight. We got on the plane, and we sat there, and we sat there, and we sat there. And in the end, I got my phone out, and I was looking up, and it said, EasyJet have cancelled all flights from Prague to Stansted, which is where we'd come from, because there was snow in the UK. Now, we were sitting there with some of our family and our young grandson, and there'd been no announcement. So I trot to the front of the plane in my usual bossy manner, find one of the staff and say, so we're not actually going anywhere. And they said, aren't we? So I said, no, on my phone, it says that. And so it wasn't very long. We got kind of chucked off the plane. And long story short, we ended up in a hotel overnight. They weren't being very helpful and saying that, the next flight that we could get with them would be several days. So we ended up managing to get ourselves on a Lufthansa flight. We took a small detour via Frankfurt and eventually ended back at Gatwick. You might remember I said we came from Stansted. So it was then a taxi ride to Stansted to pick up the car to get home. Anyone had those kind of journeys? Yeah. Sometimes life is like that. We feel like we have got it all planned, but then something comes along and we find ourselves stuck in the airport or on a detour that we didn't expect, or on our way to a destination that feels a little bit uncertain. Now, just over 3 years ago, as most of you probably know, I was one of the directors here. And I had responsibility for the pastoral things that kind of happen in this church. And I taught in the School of Supernatural Life on all things pastoral as well. And I wasn't planning on going anywhere. But one day, when I was praying, God said to me, it's time to step down. I want you to step down from being a director. Now, I had all sorts of things that I tried to persuade God that he didn't really mean it. But I haven't set anything up, Lord, to carry on after I'm gone. I mean, how could they manage without me? Of course, God knows very well that he can manage without me. It wasn't part of my plan. But I do know that when God tells you to do something, even if it's not what you expect, the best thing to do is just to get on and do it. And so eventually, I told the rest of the team what was happening, and I started to work out my notice towards retirement. And in those few months, when I was working my notice, I started to talk to God and say, well, what am I going to be doing with my retirement? I started, I could do some fun things I've not sort of done before because I haven't had time. And, and what do you want me to do in the church, Lord? And what will I? So I had lots of questions for God, and he wasn't really answering any of them. But, we make our plans. I'd thought of a few things. A month after I finally stopped being a director, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And over the next 2 years, I found myself on a very different journey to the one that I'd imagined. Now, it was quite a physical journey, very full on, sometimes painful, sometimes exhausting. But what I have learned is that whatever journey we're on, in the natural, if you like, we're on a spiritual journey as well. We're on a journey of the heart. And that journey of the heart over the last 3 years has been so incredible and changed my relationship so much and changed me so much. But my relationship with our amazing, incredible, faithful, beautiful, powerful God has changed forever because of the journey that I've been on. And that's really what I wanted to speak about this morning, the journey of the heart that we are all on. And so I've called this preach, The Pilgrimage of the Heart, Why the Journey Matters as Much as the Destination. So I'm going to read, have we got the slide with the psalm on it? Can go up there. Thanks, Psalm 84. I'm going to read Psalm 84. And as we go through it, there's a little bit of a spoiler. I'm going to be looking particularly at verses 5 and 7. So you might want to sort of pay particular attention to those ones. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young. A place near your altar, Lord Almighty, my King and my God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. Hear my prayer, Lord God Almighty. Listen to me, God of Jacob. Look on our shield, O God. Look with favor on your anointed one. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless. Lord Almighty, blessed is the one who trusts in you. Now, I could preach on that whole psalm because actually it is an amazing psalm. But if I did that, we'd still be here next Sunday and no one's going to thank me for that. So we will mostly look at 5 to 7. It's thought that this psalm was written by the sons of Korah, and they were Levites who served as doorkeepers and musicians in the temple. And this psalm was likely to have been what they call a pilgrimage song, which would have been used by those who were traveling to Jerusalem, to the temple. And as we look at it, we can see that it's a psalm that expresses a great longing for God's presence and a passionate love of worship. Verses 2, 4, and 10, my soul yearns, even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. And better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. See, it's really clear, isn't it, that to the psalmist, the greatest blessing he can imagine is being in God's presence and worship him in his house. And there is something for us there. Now, we had an amazing time already of worship this morning, and we're going to have some more at the end. And I don't know about you, but I can really feel the presence of God in this place as we worship. But I'll ask you a question. When you step outside your front door on a Sunday morning, what's your heart doing? Are you yearning for God's house? Is your deep desire to meet him here? Because there's something very special about being able to meet as the body of Christ, being able to meet as a church family. And, there's that phrase, isn't there? Familiarity breeds contempt. Sometimes we can be so used to it that we don't actually value it for what it is. I know that this cancer journey that I've been on has taught me what a privilege coming to the house of God is. For more than a year, about 18 months, I couldn't come to church on a Sunday morning because it's very busy here, very full of people, and I was told that because of worries about my immunity and the treatments I was having and all of that I shouldn't be here. Now, I was able to catch up with people, in smaller groups, but I so missed being here on a Sunday morning. It's an absolute gift that we have, and we can come into Jesus' presence, into Father God's presence anytime we like, but to come and worship him together, that is something very, very special. I said I was going to major on verses 5 to 7, didn't I? So we probably should go to that. Let me just say again, though, I know what it's like sometimes if you've had a very busy week. I'm not a morning person, really. So it's very easy. And I've had times when I thought, I just want to lie in. I don't want to go to church this morning. Or you may have other reasons why you think, I don't know. Really, I could be doing something else. But don't let go of knowing how precious it is and what a privilege it is that we can meet together and we can worship him together. Okay, so go back to verse 5 of that one. Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. And in some translations, it's slightly different. It would be translated as, blessed are those whose strength is in you, in whose heart are the highways to Zion. But the meaning is really the same. It's a heartfelt, deep desire and resolve to find my home in him and to follow him and his ways all the days of my life. And knowing that the strength I need to do that is not mine, it's his. We are on a journey of the heart that starts when we're born again and ends, well, at least this part of it, when we leave this world and we see him face to face. You could say that on this journey, the final destination is seeing him face to face in the heavenly courts. But it's on the journey itself that we learn to be more and more like Jesus. And it's on the journey itself that he transforms us. It's on the journey that we learn to trust him. You won't need to learn that when you see him face to face. It will just be. But now we have to learn how to trust him. Someone who didn't know Jesus once said to me that Christianity is pie in the sky when you die. But the strength of the Christian life is not found in just reaching the destination. It's the transformation that happens on the journey. The journey matters as much as the destination, and actually, to be honest, I might say even more. It's on the journey where you will grow in faithfulness and love and kindness and peace and joy and purity and ... I'm sure you can fill in plenty of other things there. God transforms us on the journey. I actually think there are lots of little destinations along the way. Every time, God teaches us one of those big life lessons and we get it. That's kind of a destination, isn't it? And we go, and hopefully the next time that comes on, I know, I learned that. God has shown me that already. I think, when we did years ago, we talked a lot about identity, and we still talk about it now. And I think Sarah preached a few weeks ago. She mentioned it. Good preach that was, if you haven't heard it. And, so we learned something in that. We got hold of something that God was really teaching us about our identity in him as sons and daughters of the King. And sometimes there are just lessons like that. Sometimes there are personal lessons in our life, and they're like those little destinations that God brings us to along the way. For me, on my cancer journey, I learned to love the wilderness, the dry places. Now, I know that probably sounds slightly weird, but it's because it was in that place, in the tough times, in the wilderness, in the hard places, that I found God in a way that I have never found him before. I experienced his love and his faithfulness and his strength in crazy ways. And I experienced streams and rivers in the wilderness, which he promises, and places refreshing. I also learned how to dig wells better, but I'll come back to that a little bit later. I want to just quickly share an example of that love and faithfulness of God on the journey. A little while after I'd sort of first started my chemo sessions, I was finding it hard to sleep because of some particular drugs that they had me on. And one night, when I couldn't sleep, I was just flicking through the Psalms, and my attention was caught by Psalm 91. But I found myself just repeating over and over again the first two verses. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and strength, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Now that was kind of good verses for where I was, but I actually wanted to read the rest of the psalm, as I could see that it goes on. It's the one where it talks about saving us from deadly pestilences. And when you're sitting there with cancer, that feels like quite a good thing. But I couldn't get past those first two verses. And in the end, I stuck a Post-it note in my Bible thinking, I'll come back to that in the morning. And I went back to sleep. Next morning, get into the shower, as you do, started washing my hair. But as I was rubbing the shampoo into my hair, it literally started to come out in handfuls. So, of course, I'm then standing there trying to get the shampoo out of my hair, get out of the shower. By the time I got out of the shower, I can laugh about it now. It wasn't so funny at the time. When I got out of the shower, I ended up with these two bunny ears literally on my head of matted hair. And so I'm just trying to kind of pull it all out, and I realised very quickly that was never going to happen. So I had to cut these two bunny ears off. And then, of course, I sat there and sort of praised God. No, I didn't. I went downstairs and I cried all over Stuart. But I need to go back slightly. This is the shopping. When I was first diagnosed, I have a lovely Christian niece called Hannah. And she sent me this jar. And it says on the front, God didn't bring you this far to leave you, based on Philippians. Let me just take the lid off. And she had filled it with loads and loads and loads of little cards like this, all different colours and patterns. And inside each one, she had written a Bible verse. And she said to me, Auntie, when you go for chemo or something like that, you can take one of those out beforehand to encourage you along the way. So having cried all over Stuart, I then thought, I need one of those verses. So I open the jar, I take it out, I open it, and what do you think I read? Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and fortress, my God in whom I trust. Then I started laughing, which did confuse my husband, I have to say. But anyway, not quite the end of that story. The next morning, I was going for chemo, and I got a message first thing from my brother, who of course knew none of this. And he sent me a message, and he said, Sis, I've been praying for you in my quiet time this morning, and God gave me these verses for you. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. If I didn't believe those two verses when I first read them, I did by Friday morning. They started to become very, very real to me. I felt sheltered, I felt at rest, I felt safe, and I knew that I could trust God, whatever the future might hold, because he'd bothered to set that up for me. If he can do that, what else can he do? As we look at the next verse of Psalm 84, it says, as they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. Now, the valley of Baca means the dry place or the place of weeping. And the truth is, most of us will go through a valley of Baca at some point in our lives. And I guess that for most of us, if we knew we were going to be doing that, we'd be saying, well, just get me through it as quickly as you can. I do not want to stay here. And we cry out in the valley of Baca to God for our circumstances to change. And maybe we ask our Christian friends, pray for breakthrough, pray for breakthrough. This is a terrible place to be right now. I really hate this. I want to get out of it. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, we'll worry about that later. Thank you, Toby. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. God wants us to cry out to him with what's going on. He wants us to get support from our kind of Christian friends. And breakthrough is a very glorious thing. And we've seen some amazing breakthroughs here, haven't we? We've seen, miraculous healings. We've seen amazing provision. I know many of you here have got testimonies of what God is doing. But what about when you're walking through the place of weeping and you've been doing it for a while and the breakthrough hasn't happened and you're scared and you're tired and you've really had enough? See, God knows what we need in the place of weeping, and he knows that it can be a place of transformation. I do not believe that God gave me cancer, but he did allow it. He didn't heal me miraculously. I've had to walk through it. But in that, he has changed and transformed me. And his promise that the valley can become a place that is filled with his water of life, a place of springs, a place of refreshing, I have found that on this whole journey. And the first reason that that is true is because God promises that he walks through it with us. In fact, on our journey through life, wherever we are, God is both our destination and our companion along the way. We walk in the presence of the destination with a capital D, and that is an incredible, amazing thing. And secondly, God knows what we're going to need for the journey, and he prepares us for it, and he will be our strength through it. One of the things that really helped me was in the few years before I was diagnosed with cancer, God gave me a real heart for all the John Mark Comer stuff, which some of you know. But it's going back to some of the old practices, spending time sort of solitude with God, sort of reading the Bible in a different way, Lectio Divina, hearing God in it. Lots of quiet practices. And most people know I'm not a particularly quiet person, so that was quite different for me. But I got so much from it. And one of the main things was he taught me to live in the present. I've preached on this before, but, God is the God of past, present, and future, but we only meet him in the present. You can only meet him in this moment, because this is where we live, because we are, creatures of time. So he taught me a lot about that, about living in the moment. He taught me a lot about spending time just me and him in a different way. So when I was diagnosed with cancer and suddenly I couldn't come to church and suddenly it was just me and him, I had some of the tools that I needed to be able to do that. He had started to prepare me because he knew what was coming. He has, and the third thing that really helps us along the way is that he has given us the word. He's given us his word. And there are so many promises in there. Promises for life, just generally, so guidance and provision and purpose, and also promises for the dry places, love and peace and presence and joy. I got to really love the Psalms during my cancer journey. And Toby, you mentioned Psalm 23 this morning. You were speaking, and I love that. Psalm 23 was one that God really spoke to me through. And do you know, there's something very interesting about Psalm 23. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to read right through it. But it starts off, we all know it, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Have you noticed that's all in the third person? He. Until you get to the valley of the shadow of death. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. You, your rod, your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. That is because in the hardest times, in the valley of Baca, in the valley of the shadow of death, God draws even closer. And he becomes so personal. When you really need him, when the rubber hits the road and you reach out to him, he is there in an incredible way. And I love that because it reminds me of the personal you God who is in it with me, who walks with me. There's one other thing in Psalm 23 I want to mention as well. And when we get to the end and it talks about goodness and his goodness and mercy following me all the days of my life, we all know that bit. That word goodness is the Hebrew word chesed. And chesed appears 245 times in the Old Testament, but more than half are in the Psalms. We don't really have an equivalent in English. It's a bit like shalom. We find that hard to translate. Well, chesed is like that. But basically, it gets translated as goodness, mercy, faithfulness, love, and loving kindness. And it encompasses compassion, kindness, loyalty, favor, devotion, grace, and more. It is God's love in action. God's love in action. It intervenes on behalf of loved ones and comes to their rescue. And one theologian wrote, and I love this, when the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything. When the person from whom I have a right to expect nothing gives me everything. Ultimately, chesed is embodied in Jesus. And we are called to be like him. So we are also called to express chesed, that love of God, to one another, and to be loving, compassionate, merciful, kind people. God walks with us, and that is what gets us through the valley of Baca. He is our incredible, amazing God who will never stop loving us. It says that his love will follow us, his chesed will follow us. The word for that is actually much stronger. Again, in the Hebrew, it's the word pursue. And it's used of armies, pursuing armies, or if you're out hunting and you're pursuing a prey. So what that means is God says that his goodness and his mercy is going to pursue us. He will hunt you down with his love and his mercy all the days of your life. What more can we want than that? Gosh, the time is just going, and I want to get back to worship, so I'm going to try and finish it within 5 minutes, guys. All right. God has, as I said, has also given us a family. And on my journey, I had 14 people who were on a WhatsApp group, and they prayed faithfully for me. They shared words of encouragement, Bible verses, worship songs, testimonies for 2.5 years. And if you're here, you know who you are, and I just want to say thank you for doing that, because that was amazing, and that really helped me. And if you are struggling right now, I want to really encourage you, put the pride aside, put the shame aside, because I felt that. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't be upset here. I should somehow just hang on to God and it'll all be fine. I needed those people at times. And you need your Christian friends, brothers and sisters as well. So if you need help, if you're struggling, please reach out to people that you trust and ask them to walk alongside you. Okay, so the other thing I really wanted to just very quickly talk about is I mentioned that I learned to be a well digger. Verse 6 of Psalm 84 says, as they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. They make it a place of springs. Do you notice that? The autumn rain also covers it with pools. So in the Middle East, ancient peoples would dig wells, small pits, carve out cisterns from the rock in anticipation of the rain that was to come and to fill them. And they thought about it as well as a sort of, legacy is not quite the right word, but it would be there to give refreshment to the travellers that came after them as well. And in the Spirit, we can dig wells in anticipation of the grace of God. I can create wells for God to fill. So how do I do that? Well, I was just trying to think the best way to explain this. I went through a point in my journey when I really wasn't sleeping. They had me on some steroids as well as everything else. And I used to wake up at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, I've already said I'm not a morning person. I am definitely not a 3, 4 or 5 o'clock person. People that get up and have a quiet time at 5 o'clock, are you mad? Is all I can say to that. And so when I was waking up most nights like that, I'm thinking to myself, what do I do with this? Because I'm going to be tired all day. Oh, Lord, it's not fair. I've got all this to deal with, and now on top of it, I'm not sleeping. Well, I did that for a little while, and then God spoke to me and said, well, you could do something better with it. And so when I woke up, I started, rather than just complaining, I started to pray. And I would say, okay, God, who do you want to put into my mind this morning? Who should I be praying for? And I would just pray, and I usually ended up praying for somewhere around an hour, and then I would fall asleep. I was digging a well for God to fill by doing that. He needed to tell me, and often God will actually tell us and show us how to dig those wells. But it's also things like praying when I don't feel like it, praying anyway. Choosing to read my Bible when I'm tired and don't really want to think about anything and would rather just watch a television program. Choosing not to complain, but to thank God for every blessing I can think of, even when I'm in pain or need. Reaching out to for help instead of letting pride or embarrassment stand in the way and cause me to isolate myself. When I choose to cry out to God rather than just sitting and crying and feeling sorry for myself. When I choose faith over discouragement. We sometimes act like faith is something we are just clinging on to with our fingertips. So if I just have a bit more faith, I might get there. That's not what God asks. Faith as small as a mustard seed's enough. So it's actually turning our attention to Him. And I have the amount of faith I have, God, but you have all the faith I need. So I'm just going to give that to you. When I can't see any sign of a breakthrough, but I choose to trust Him anyway for the rain I can't yet see. With heart set on pilgrimage, you can change the landscape. Don't miss what God is doing today because we aren't yet seeing the breakthrough. Sometimes the journey itself is the breakthrough because it's the breakthrough in our relationship and our heart with God. Right. The end of this psalm, these few verses in the psalm, they go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion. This is about developing resilience. It says that we go from strength to strength, which is like a compounding effect. Each mile that we travel with God can add another spiritual layer of grit that we didn't have before. Our experience of God on the journey is a thing that changes and strengthens us. And it's also about that withness of God, that God is with us and He gives us the strength to do it, to do the journey. Sometimes we can feel like God has put us in places that are too much for us to handle. I did feel that sometimes along the journey. When I looked at the mountain ahead of me, chemo, surgery, radiotherapy, it seemed too much. He gives us the strength to handle what we can, and He handles the rest. All He asks is for us to walk with Him and let Him do the stuff we can't do. He wants us to learn to trust Him. You don't learn to trust when everything's already settled. You learn to trust when the map is blurry and the resources are low. And I also think this whole psalm is about intimacy. It's something that can also go from strength to strength as we walk with Him, learn to trust Him, and give control back to Him. So I want to finish there because I would like us to have a little bit of worship before we stop. Can I get the team to come back up? And while they're doing that, I just want to talk to you about 3 groups of people. God said there may be some of you here today that would fall into that group. He said to me that some of you feel that you are in the valley of Baca, that you're in the valley of weeping. And if you are feeling that you are in that dry, weeping place today, your call to action, if you like, is not to just run faster. Some of you have been trying to do that. If I just run a bit faster, I can get through this. It's not. It's time to pick up a shovel. God says it's time to stop waiting for the valley to end. And I know that's hard, but he wants you to trust him. He wants you to start digging those wells, to trust that as you turn towards him, the early rain of God's grace is already on its way to fill the holes that you dig in faith. There's nothing that's amazing about our God. He will put his hand on the shovel too. So he's not asking you to do all the digging. He will dig them with you. He will show you how to do that. So as we worship, if that's you, I'm not going to do a call or anything, but I want you just to think about that with God and ask him how you can start to dig some wells in the place that you're in at the moment, how you can trust him. And the second one I had was those who are exhausted, calling them the drained. If you feel like you're not going from strength to strength, you're going from strength to weakness, then maybe it's time to think about what you're running on. Some of you, God says, are walking on a highway of your own making. You're relying on your own strength rather than his. And some of you may be in places that he doesn't intend you to be, so everything feels like a burden. Today he says, give me your heavy load, and I will give you my easy yoke. So if that's you, just spend a few moments as we're worshiping, handing it over to him and ask what he wants to give you in return. That's really important. As you hand it over to him, say, Father, what is it that you want to give me in return? And finally, the stationary. Maybe you feel like you've stopped moving on this journey because the road's got too steep, or you're tired, or you're discouraged, or someone hurt you and you're offended, or you feel you've just been let down. The invitation today, and actually this is an invitation to all of us really, is to set your heart on pilgrimage once more. He says you just need to take one step towards him. Take one moment to rededicate yourself to him. If you respond to that invitation, I promise you, he will do the rest. Amen.